Los Angeles Lakers, they have a new head coach. His name is former ABC broadcaster slash ESPN J.J. Redick. This has been rumored for weeks, almost months, if you will, even ever since the Lakers brought in Dan Hurley, which who knows at this point, it sounds like Dan Hurley took the Lakers for a ride as opposed to vice versa there. But JJ's a young guy. His only coaching experience in the world is coaching fourth graders, and he goes from that to coaching arguably one of, if not the best of all time, in LeBron James. Still potentially a top 10-ish player in the world in Anthony Davis. The roster needs a lot of work, as we know. We know Darvin Ham underachieved in the eyes of Laker Nation. But Josh, your thoughts on JJ Redick? The news that has felt non-official for 2 months is finally official.
Well, first of all, with JJ Redick going to the Lakers, I wonder what the new trio is going to be for the NBA Finals on ABC with Mike Breen. Could they bring back Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson?
Well, by the way, you do know that Jeff Van Gundy is now the lead assistant for the Los Angeles Clippers, so he's not going back to broadcasting.
Oh, well, I missed that little caveat, but we'll see. That part has me intrigued. But in terms of this whole JJ Redick to the Lakers stuff, I can't help but get the whole podcast stuff out of my mind. And I think you and I have gone back and forth on this a number of times. But the fact that LeBron was doing this podcast with JJ Redick, breaking down how would you stop Luka Doncic, X's and O's of why didn't this play work, and like how would you run this offense and all this and that, while Darvin Ham was on the hot seat for the Lakers. That's a little bit of it had my eyebrows going up. Let's put it that way.
Well, I'll say this for JJ Redick, no fault of his own. I wish him good luck. I don't know how good he's going to be, but I can tell you one thing: he's either going to be, in my opinion, really good, or it's going to be a disaster. I don't think that there's this in between situation where he's a 6 seed or a 7 seed every year, and he's a 500 head coach just sort of hanging on. I think it's going to be he's either going to have command of the room or he's not going to have command of the room, and we're going to know very early. The one thing I will say, though, is, again, you take a look at trends now across sports, whether it is, the NBA or the NFL or even Major League Baseball. What we have been seeing over the past maybe 3, 4, 5 years to the half decade is these coaches who have little to no actual coaching experience, but they were veteran players who, maybe were not the star of the team. Maybe they were the top backup, or, they were the 8th or ninth man off the bench in basketball. Who have little coaching experience but knew how to communicate with players, were good locker room leaders. These guys have come in and have proven to be really good coaches. So
exactly. Look at what Steve Kerr has done in Golden State. Look at what Tyronn Lue did when he became the Cavs head coach, and his continued success with the Clippers. I know they haven't won a title yet, but Tyronn Lue has made the best of what he's had with the Clippers.
Now, there's other examples. Obviously Jason Kidd in Milwaukee was a disaster, and in Brooklyn he was a disaster, but he's proven to be good in Dallas. Steve Nash was an unmitigated disaster in Brooklyn, and whether that was his fault or not, who knows?
I would say that was not his fault. But
so JJ is, though. I mean, he's going into a high pressure situation. We're going to talk about the NBA draft here in a little bit, but what feels like the most meaningful storyline in this entire draft is who's going to draft LeBron James' son. And if it's the Los Angeles Lakers, is it going to be LeBron's retirement tour? And did they hire JJ Redick just for LeBron for one season, or did they hire him for the long term? And if he truly was the guy they wanted, why did they go out to do this whole fiasco with Dan Hurley?
I mean, all of those are very fair questions. And I feel like the sentiment in the locker room is partially going to be, oh, you're just here because of your podcast with LeBron. Like, you're just LeBron's boy. So, is he. This kind of harkens back to what you were, one of the questions you were asking earlier. Is he going to have full command of that locker room? Is he good? Is he going to be able to like control things? Because we've seen that from a lot of these veteran players that have transitioned to head coaches. You know, again, Steve Kerr, Ty Lue, Jason Kidd. They like to have that element of control. But when you're dealing with arguably the greatest of all time, although in my opinion, Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Again, we don't need to get into that discussion. But when you're dealing with the second greatest player of all time in LeBron, he it, he demands that he takes more of the controls. So when the Lakers run an offensive play, is that going to be JJ Redick calling the offense, or is it going to be LeBron?
Well, again, I do think that LeBron and many other players in the NBA, I think players in general in different sports respect other players more than they respect players that maybe have not played the game, because players will always tell you players see the game differently than non players. And I do think that the one thing I liked about what Redick said in the press conference last, I believe it was yesterday, was about the fact that yes, he is going to embrace math. He is going to embrace analytics, which is something that this Lakers team has not been good at during the past 2 years with Darvin Ham, which was shooting the free ball. Now, again, the roster needs to be reworked. That's on Rob Pelinka. Whether they go after a third star or not at this point, I don't know. But I think that, it all depends on this roster for the Lakers. How does it look with Redick? Is it going to be a lot of 3-point shooters? Do they redo the bench? Because that's going to determine his early success, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the element of shooting, because what we've seen throughout LeBron's career is when you surround him with shooters, that's when he's at his best. If you remember, when Miami went back to back, who did the Heat put around LeBron and Dwayne
Shane
Wade?
Battier, Mike Miller,
Ray
Mario
Allen.
Chalmers, Ray Allen. I mean, you name, they had a boatload. When he was even here the second time, the likes of J.R. Smith, Amon Shumpert, Mike Miller, Kyle Korver,
Channing Frye.
Channing Frye. I mean, you name them. So, and again, I do think that when you watch the current NBA champion Boston Celtics play, and JJ had said multiple times on the podcast this year that he loved the way the Celtics have played. And I said it last week. I think teams are going to try to replicate it. I don't think it's going to be successful, because I think it's going to be very hard to replicate what Boston did, where you essentially have 8 3-and-D guys. Now, different skill levels there, but 8 3-and-D guys that can all come off the bench, knock down the three, and defend. That's what I think the Lakers are going to try to do with Redick, because, again, I think he's going to be very more analytical. I think he's going to try to push the pace. The one thing I think he will do that will, I think, benefit LeBron and even AD here, I think that they will listen to Redick when it comes to managing his minutes. I don't think Redick is going to push LeBron to 40, 41, 42 minutes a game in November, December. AD 37, 38 minutes in these December games, because I think Redick is going to know, hey, we're going to play the long game here. We want to be our best for April, May, and June.
So when you look at the Western Conference, you obviously have Denver, you have Dallas, you have Oklahoma City, you've got Minnesota, you've got Houston there.
Clippers are still in there somewhere.
Yep.
By the way, who knows what Memphis does with John Moran? Could they make somewhat of a comeback? New Orleans potentially is on the come up. So the West is loaded, and right now, without there being any moves, because the NBA free agency doesn't start until basically the end of this week, the end of this month. Without any moves, I think your question would be, when you look at the West, where do the Lakers sit?
Yes, that's what I was alluding to. Correct.
They're probably right where they were at the end of this season, which is 7th or 8th, right around that play-in, maybe a 6 if they can push it. But I think that's like without any moves being made, it's probably right where they are.
So, and I don't think I'm wrong for including the Houston Rockets in that conversation because I think the Rockets are on the come up, but we can have that discussion on a different day.
They could be the Orlando Magic next year, I'm telling you.
They very well could be. Orlando could be a very dangerous team if they get somebody like Paul George or Clay Thompson. But again, we
By
can
the
get
way, a team we didn't even mention, Golden State, they're still there. Now, what they do probably depends on how relevant they're going to be.
yes,
But,
and Phoenix. Don't forget about the Suns with Kevin Durant. And
yeah,
yeah. So as the Western Conference is loaded, and you have Sacramento too.
yeah.
So So it's hard to say where the Lakers fit in. But the thing is, when you're dealing with the Lakers, you have all of that history. You have like Kareem, Magic, Wilt, Kobe, Shaq, Pau Gasol, and it comes with championships. So I get that you have to have realistic expectations for the Lakers. So most likely, more than likely, I should say what you said of like a 6 seed or a 7 seed, something like that. But by the same token, if you're wearing the purple and gold and you have the name James on the back or the name Davis on the back, it is still championship expectations, is it not?
I would say for the town, probably yeah, but they're delusional. This team is not a championship team. Until you can get past the Denver Nuggets, you are not a championship team. And that is the question. I know Dallas won the West this year, but we know the team the Lakers can't beat is Denver. So that is the question Redick and crew are going to have to answer is how do we beat Denver? That's step one. And again, to beat Denver, do you sacrifice something? Are you not as well built to beat a Dallas? Or are you not as well built to beat a Minnesota? Or are you not as well built to beat an Oklahoma City? Possibly, but you got to make sure you can defeat Denver first because you haven't done that with Darvin Ham.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The Lakers lost to the Nuggets, who then lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who then lost to the Dallas Mavericks, who then lost to the Boston Celtics. So I wouldn't
I
say it's like a
also
simple
argue,
thing.
though, I could also argue though Minnesota was a good matchup for themselves against Denver. Dallas was not a good matchup for Minnesota. I think if Denver beat Minnesota, I think Denver's a bad matchup for Dallas. Just like I thought Dallas was a good matchup for Boston, I thought Denver was a bad matchup for Boston. So it is all matchup based. I think the Lakers, again, I think they match up pretty well right now against Dallas and against Oklahoma City. I think one more year with Anthony Edwards under his belt, I think Minnesota is very scary. And I, am anticipating that Denver is going to do something to upgrade that bench and they will be as good as they were last year, which, as we saw, was a game away again from the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah. And I'll be curious how the Lakers match up with the Houston Rockets because, again, I think the Rockets could be a very dangerous team in the West.
Well, we talked a lot about the West. There's a new head coach of the Eastern Conference. His name is Kenny Atkinson. He's the new head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, we are both from the Cleveland area. We're both Cavs fans. We both have talked at length about our dismay for former Cleveland Cavalier head coach J.B. Bickerstaff. And
Who
what
by the way, I heard he's interviewing for the head coaching vacancy with the Detroit Pistons.
that would actually be interesting because again, JV is a coach that can build young players up. I actually don't think that'd be a horrible fit in Detroit. Who somehow and for some reason got rid of Monty Williams. I didn't understand that one. But be that as it may, when I first heard this news of Kenny Atkinson as the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, my first reaction was literally, whatever. I mean, that's actually how I felt. It wasn't a splashy hire. It wasn't this, oh my God, he's our savior hire. It was, okay, Donovan Mitchell probably signed off on this hire. The Cavs are going to work for Donovan Mitchell to get an extension. I do like the fact that he has history with players like Brook Lopez and Al Horford at turning them into 3-point shooters. He did come as an assistant from Golden State, so maybe he brings some of that motion and pace to the Cavs. But
And
ultimately,
he has a history with Jared Allen and Karis LeVert.
yes, and yeah, Karis LeVert. But yes, um, if the Cleveland Cavaliers do anything this offseason, it sounds like they're not going to, but we both know they need to reshape the roster. I don't know if a new coach is going to make the difference with this current roster, especially the bench that this team has.
Yeah. I mean, we have the 20th pick in the draft tomorrow, so I don't have high expectations for whoever that is going to be. Unlike when we drafted Ojai Abaji a couple years ago before we eventually traded him to Utah. I still wish we hadn't included him in the trade, but nonetheless. Um, but it's just like I don't know what to make of the hire until I see the product on the court. Just like, we were just talking about JJ Redick to the Lakers. We can have all these expectations and we can have all these conversations, but until I see it on the court, how can I really evaluate it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and a lot like the Lakers, and we talk about their roster, the Cavs need to completely redo their roster as well with more 3-point shooting than what they got off the bench. They basically need a Levert and a Coro like players that are better shooters. And they need better bigs. You need a backup four for Evan Mobley they haven't had for years. And as good as Tristan Thompson did as a backup five to Jared Allen, you could upgrade that position, I believe, as well. So I also think Max Strus would be a perfect bench guy to come off the bench, but he's your starting small forward right now. You got to upgrade that. Is Strus a guy that maybe you could throw out there in some trade conversations? I don't know. I guess it's possible to see if you can get some more value back for a Darius Garland trade if you're going after a wing. But no matter what move the Cavs make right now, I think they're in tier two. I think they're in there somewhere along the lines of like the Knicks and maybe Indiana and some of these other teams that are chasing Boston. And I think Boston is on tier one right now all by themselves as it relates to the East.
I mean, that makes sense because they are the defending champs as of last Monday.
They are, but my point is, it's not like Milwaukee is close. They're further behind than I thought they were. The Cavs to me are not that close. It's not like you have a situation where out west, like I actually put Denver, Minnesota, Dallas. I put them all on the same tier.
I would also include Oklahoma City in that tier, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Maybe next year I'll be with you there. I gotta see a little more out of that Oklahoma City club because they're so young.
Okay,
Um,
no, but I do get what you're saying. Um, in terms of the East, I would say the Celtics are on their own tier. Of all the tier 2 teams, I would say the Knicks are probably the closest to breaking into that tier 1
and I agree with you.
because I feel like if New York was fully healthy, first of all, they would have won that series against Indiana. And secondly, I think the Knicks could have at least pushed the Celtics to a game 6 or to a game 7 and
That I don't know because they were. If they were fully healthy,
that's what
and
I'm saying.
obviously they lost Robinson. I'm not going to count the Randall. Let's say they still don't have Randall because he was out before the playoffs. If
Right.
they had Robinson and if they had some of the other guys, maybe. But I don't know. That Celtics team still shot way better than that Knicks team did. So
Right. But in terms of Kenny Atkinson, yeah, he was the lead assistant in Golden State. Or I don't know if he was the lead assistant, so I don't want to say that, but
he was one of the top assistants.
okay, fair. So, like, he got to work with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, the best backcourt in NBA history. I don't think there's really an argument for anyone else. Um, so he could bring that to Cleveland with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, but the problem is Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are not Steph Curry and Klay Thompson.
Well,
We
and Clay Thompson 6'7" and plays defense, where Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are 2 6'1" guards, and one of them falls to the floor every other play of their life.
Right. And Golden State, they had Harrison Barnes, they had Andre Iguodala, they had Kevin Durant, but they had Andrew Wiggins for those title runs. We don't really have that definitive small forward position lock, locked up the way the Warriors did for their title runs.
No, and I've heard these big swing trades being thrown out there. Brandon Ingram has been one that's really popular, and Ingram for Darius Garland swap. I don't know if that gets you over the top. I like Brandon Ingram as a player. I think he's a very good player. I don't think that gets you over the top. I don't think he's your second best player on a championship team. I've alluded to this to you before. I think what maybe could make the Cavs an addition by not essentially adding anybody, can Evan Mobley expand his range? Can Evan Mobley become not always a stretch four, but can he become a dependable 3-point shooter and space out the floor for Jared Allen underneath? Because that's what the Cavs need is stretch guys that can make shots.
Yeah. I mean, we saw with the Celtics, they would play that two big lineup at times with Porzingis and Al Horford.
And by the way, both of them can shoot the three.
Yes. And it worked for them. And, the two big lineup worked for the most part with the Minnesota Timberwolves this season. I know they fell apart in the Western Conference Finals, but for the most part, you would say their two big lineup was a success this season. So we've seen evidence that a two big lineup can work in this league.
It can work if you have the spacing. And right now, the Cavs don't have the spacing because
Right.
Okoro can't shoot. Levert
No.
is inconsistent.
Yep.
And so Strus really is inconsistent at the moment. He can go super hot and super cold. I like him a lot as a player. But again, would I lose sleep if he's involved in one of these trade packages potentially? It would depend on who you'd get back.
I mean, there's a guy out in our nation's capital who I've been asking for the Cavs to trade for a couple seasons now, and that's Kyle Kuzma. I I feel like if we had Kyle Kuzma along with potentially a Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and pair him alongside Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, that would work, would it not?
It would work if Mobley becomes your second best player. Mobley has to take the leap.
Okay, so so basically, what you're telling me is that whether we were to if we were to trade for Brandon Ingram or Kyle Kuzma, it still depends on Evan Mobley taking that next step. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because Ingram and Kuzma wouldn't be your best player on your second best on a championship team. And by the way, Jared Allen, I like him. He doesn't give you the scoring production enough to be your second best player. I think he can be your third, and then if Ingram or even Kuzma is your fourth, that works.
Okay. Honestly, if I'm the Cavs, I'm calling the Clippers and seeing it. Although Paul George could become a free agent, so maybe you could sign him, maybe. Which you advocate for that, I know.
I've been advocating for that for the last 2 years. I also, real quick, just go back to the Atkinson hire before we move on to the next topic. I think the most interesting aspect of this whole hire was it sounded like owner Dan Gilbert's back in the building and making the decisions.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, why didn't we hire Sam Cassell, the assistant from the Boston Celtics, who does have a lot of experience, and he was, with a championship winning team. Why didn't we look at him? And when Monty Williams became available after the Pistons fired him, why didn't we take a look at him? That I do question those two things.